Hello and welcome to a biomechanical analysis of maximal velocity in sprinting. This is assessment 3 for XNB272 Biomechanics. Firstly, part 1, determining what to observe. First stage is to identify the biomechanical goal of the skill. So maximal velocity in sprinting is the absolute peak highest velocity that the athlete reaches throughout the sprint. Therefore, the goal of the maximal velocity phase of the sprint is to achieve the highest velocity possible. A deterministic model was designed, outlining all of the key variables that are highly important in the sprint. And these are viewed here with maximal velocity breaking into stride rate and stride length, and then further being broken down into multiple levels there. Now we're going to go through all of the quantitative and qualitative variables that were selected to be analysed in this presentation. I've included an image here courtesy of Matz, Wolf and Elizabeth 2021. Firstly, ground contact time during stance. This is T6 to T8. Essentially, a smaller ground contact time means higher step rate. And Matz, Wolf and Elizabeth 2021 states that the faster the foot can land and then push off will increase total velocity. Hip extension angular velocity during pre-support backswing, T4 to T6. This hip extension angular velocity is what facilitates the generation of velocity and therefore the generation of propulsive impulse at touchdown. And Clark, Meng and Stern 2020 supports this, where a higher hip flexion angular velocity means that the femur will be moving faster, increasing the velocity and increasing the impulse. And as for hip flexion during knee drive, which is T4, essentially a high knee lift is important because it facilitates more stretch of the hamstrings and gluteus maximus muscles prior to hip extension, according to Manzer, Matz and Hollander 2016. A higher knee drive increases the total displacement of the leg. So essentially bringing that knee up higher increases the distance that it has to travel when beginning hip extension, hip and knee extension during that pull phase from knee drive to touchdown. Increasing this displacement of the leg increases velocity of the leg before stance push-off, and this increases propulsive impulse. For qualitative variables, we've got 2 foot contact under center of mass and a neutral upright spine. A foot contact under center of mass, essentially this minimizes braking impulse applied at touchdown. And braking impulse is highly inversely related to maximal velocity. Deshawn and Nelson, 1964, support this by saying the primary reason for a decrease in running velocity is horizontal distance between first contact and center of gravity at touchdown. As for posture, this is what facilitates higher knee drive, and Merrow, Comey and Gregor 1992 state the head, neck and spine should be aligned in a neutral position. And Young and Choice 2007 also state the pelvis should exhibit a slight posterior tilt, therefore meaning there's going to be a slight trunk lean, but mostly upright. Essentially, by having a slight trunk lean, this ensures the center of mass is slightly in front of the base of support, which allows for slight forward momentum to occur. Moving on to part 2, observing the performance. Some key considerations: a side-on camera angle filmed from the sagittal plane was used, as this is the most suitable for a kinematic analysis of sprinting. Natural lighting positioned behind the camera was used, so shadows were casted onto the background behind and not onto the floor in front. A white background contrasted with tight-fitting dark black clothing was used. This was done to maximize visibility of all the key positions throughout the sprint. And filming was done with an iPhone 13 using slow motion, which is 240 FPS frame rate, and a HD camera. Instructions and a warm-up were provided to the participant prior to the test to ensure they understood and were ready for all of the demands of the task. Visible markers were placed on all required landmarks, being the lateral malleolus, lateral epicondyle of the femur, and greater trochanter. This helped visibility of all of the key landmarks. And calibration, a 1 meter ruler was placed in the frame to help when conducting the analysis on Canovia. Part 3, detecting fault and weakness. For all of the quantitative variables, a study by Matz, Wolf, and Elizada 2021 was used. 26 elite male sprinters were analysed in this study, and 2D kinematic analysis of a single stride of the fastest sprint of each athlete was performed. For ground contact time, the research of elite sprinters' ground contact time was shown to be 85 milliseconds for faster sprinters. And the participant, you can see here, the contact time was 0.4 seconds or 400 milliseconds, so quite slower. For hip extension, angular velocity during pre-support backswing, in this graph here it illustrates the change in hip extension angular velocity, and you can see in this graph the peak angular velocity for the participant was 26, give or take 1 degree per second. And according to Matz, Wolf, and Elizada 2021, elite sprinters saw hip extension angular velocity of 271, give or take 105 degrees per second. For hip flexion during knee drive, this was measured by measuring the angle of hip to horizontal or thigh parallel with floor. So essentially the amount of hip flexion during the highest point of knee drive compared to the hip being horizontal where the thigh is parallel with floor. This was done because Matz, Wolf, and Elizada 2021 also measured it this way, so just felt it was the easiest way to measure it. So the participant saw 53.4 degrees difference between these two different positions, and elite sprinters had a much higher knee lift with only 21, give or take 4 degrees of hip flexion here. Moving on to the qualitative variables, you can see here in this little screenshot the center of mass in red and foot contact in dark blue. The center of mass was identified using the skeleton tool in Canovia, and the foot contact was placed here because the runner is quite flat-footed when they run, and so their heel lands and contacts the ground first, so this is where the foot contact was placed. And you can see using these dotted blue lines that the distance horizontally between foot contact and center of mass is quite low, which according to Deschon and Nelson, this is what we are after. But however, we do not want it directly underneath, otherwise this would cause us to fall, as we still need some braking force, but we want to minimize the braking force. As for the upright posture, it can be seen here that several snapshots were taken from the different phases of sprinting, and the red lines have been put through the different body segments of the upper body. And just a reminder that according to Mero, Comey, and Gregor, 1992, the head, neck, and spine should all be aligned. And unfortunately, we can't see that here, because we can see that the line through the trunk, like the line through the spine, and the line through the head and neck aren't quite aligned. However, it can be seen that the trunk is eliciting a slight forward lean, which is a result of the pelvis exhibiting a slight posterior tilt, which is what we're after, according to Young and Choice, 2007. Now the final part of this presentation, correcting the performance. There have been 3 recommendations that have been made to improve the performance. First one is to decrease ground contact time. So this can be done by either increasing the velocity of the lower limbs and increasing propulsive impulse. Another option would be to decrease the surface area of foot contact with the floor. So as mentioned before, the participant is quite a flat-footed runner, whereas most elite sprinters run on the balls of their feet, which decreases the surface area of the foot contact with the floor. And this is what we're aiming for. So we're aiming for a ground contact time of around 85 milliseconds, as per Matz, Wolf, and Elizada 2021. Second recommendation is to increase hip flexion during knee drive. So it could be seen that the knee drive or the knee lift is quite low during this phase, and that elite sprinters reach hip flexion levels of 21.4 degrees, give or take 4 degrees, according to Matz, Wolf, and Elizada 2021. And so this is essentially bringing the knee quite close up to horizontal, as opposed to the participant bringing it only quite low. By increasing this hip flexion, it would increase the displacement of the knee, which increased the distance that the knee travels during hip extension, increasing velocity and increasing propulsive impulse, and aiming for 21, give or take 4 degrees from horizontal or parallel with the floor, according to Matz, Wolf, and Elizada. Finally, the third recommendation is to bring the head further back to align with the spine and straighten posture. This would help correct the posture, as it means it's all aligned and upright and straight, supported by Merrow, Comey, and Gregor in 1992, and a study published by Vellucci and Bordet 2023 also found that a more stable horizontal gaze and dynamic trunk extension strategy was associated with improved velocity. And here are my references. Thank you for listening.